to Extension here in Franklin County. If you're not familiar with what Extension is, we are the outreach and engagement arm of the university that satisfies our land grant mission. So I work in Franklin County in agriculture and natural resources. We have three other program areas: community development, family and consumer sciences, and where we're probably known best is our youth leadership and development program area called 4-H. We have an office in all 88 counties. So if you are not a Franklin County client resident, you still have a whole bunch of educators that would be delighted to make your acquaintance and help you with some extension outreach. So today we're talking herb gardening, which is one of my favorite topics to discuss because I grow lots of herbs. And in fact, every herb in my presentation today is one that I grow, either in a container garden, in my community garden, or even in my backyard. They do a lot of wonderful things, lots of flavor in them. When they go to seed, because the majority of these are perennials, although some are annuals, and if allowed to go to seed, they are great pollinator habitat. Lots of health benefits in herbs. And then, like I said, I grow them in multiple different ways. My backyard is deep shade under walnuts, maples, and hackberries. So I have a container garden that gets a little bit of sun. I grow them in containers. I grow them in the ground. I grow them in my kitchen garden that gets part shade. They fit in lots of different places and they can look really good. Edible landscaping is hot right now, where people are growing plants that they can harvest off of. And then for the majority of these, they're very inexpensive to grow. You might buy a packet of seed, you might buy a transplant, and if you can take care of them, and a lot of these are extraordinarily hardy, they're going to last you for a long time. So there are some base things that we think about when we talk about growing herbs. One is their nutrition, right? Because we have to make sure that we fertilize our plantings when we grow. The nice things about herbs is they really don't require a lot of fertilizer, to be honest. In fact, over fertilizing them can dilute some of their flavor. So they're generally a little easier to take care of that because of that. Similar with water. A good chunk of the herbs that we grow originated over in the Mediterranean area, and they're from a little more arid climate. They can tolerate a little bit more hot and dry. Most do great in containers. A whole bunch of them, actually, I highly recommend you grow them in containers, or else they will spread and take over your garden. And then they can tolerate lots of different soil types. Although I will say, if you have super heavy clay or super sandy soil, that you would amend that to get it closer to the middle with a bunch of organic matter. And then the nice thing is, while they all like sun, and in fact, in full sun, most of them really develop their best flavor, they can tolerate, the majority of these herbs can tolerate some part shade. And in fact, almost all the ones I grow, unless it's my community garden, get at least some shade during the day. So that this fits in lots of different scenarios in your yard. And so I'm going to try to convince you to give herb gardening a try, especially if you're a beginner. I taught a class yesterday that had some folks that were just getting started with gardening, and it was a container garden class, but they were asking me what I would recommend they grow. And I thought container grown basil would be a great start to get you down the pathway as a new gardener. So when we talk about the common herbs, we have two major herb families that they come out of. One is Apiaceae, also called Umbelliferae by the shape of their flowers, which kind of looks like an umbrella. This is a bunch of herbs from that family that I like to say half of them are delicious herbs and vegetables, and the other half are deadly poisons. Dill, parsley, caraway, cilantro are the herbs. Carrots and parsley would be some delicious vegetables from that, but that family also has some deadly poisons in it. Giant hogweed and poison hemlock are also Apiaceae. Then you have the Lamiaceae family, and that is a huge variety of the most common culinary herbs that we use. Nicknamed the mint family, it also has basil and sage, oregano, thyme, rosemary, a lot of those perennials. And then you got a couple of one-offs, right? You got your alliums, that's your chives, that's the onion family, and then you have bay. So there's different ways that they do best when you start with them. And then some of these you'll notice are in both categories. So best to direct seed, you can go out and buy seed packets for basil, chives, dill, cilantro, parsley. They all do great from seed. In fact, you can grow those, all of those right now. Basil, probably wait a couple days. We got a little bit of some cold weather, but pretty soon, maybe by this weekend, all of them are ready to be direct sown. And the chive, cilantro, and parsley and dill, you could do it right now. They don't mind a little bit of cool weather. Best to transplant would be the perennials generally. That's sage, thymes, mints, rosemary, oreganos. They do best if you did a purchase transplant. You can do them in containers, you can do them in the ground, they do fine, but they get their best start if you start from a adult plant. And then basil and chives are on both lists because they both do well direct seeded, and then they both do well transplanted. In fact, a fast way to get a nice big chive patch going would be to buy a pot that has a whole bunch of chive plants in them. They're little mini bulbs. You can spread those out into a bigger space, and then they will expand to fill that space. So what I'll do is I will pop up and take a look at the chat questions and stuff periodically. So feel free to dump that in there. And if you have any chat questions, I will make sure to do my best to address all of them. So let's start talking about individual herbs, how you grow them, and what are some characteristics of them. So dill is easy to grow from seed. In fact, you'll probably plant this a few times during the season because this is one that is, as an annual, it's going to pop up, it's going to get some rapid growth, it's going to set its flowers, and it's going to go to seed. It is a pretty hardy annual in that it can tolerate some cold and it can tolerate the heat. And as an Apiaceae, all of the members of the Apiaceae family are host plants for the swallowtail butterflies. So the flowers would provide nectar, and then the foliage is the preferred food of their larval forms, that very pretty caterpillar that you see there. So, when we talk about pollinators, we talk about them as very vital members of our ecology or in our bioenvironment in our garden there. But this one's a little bit of a troublesome pollinator because if you contrast it with, say, the monarch butterfly, which is a protected pollinator, one that we're trying to do our best to preserve habitat and do intentional plantings, their preferred food for their larval form is actually a different plant altogether, the milkweed family of plants. And the milkweed family of plants is poisonous to humans, companion animals, and livestock, so we don't mind if they eat it. But when you have the larval form of the swallowtail butterflies eating your Apiaceae, these are some hungry, hungry caterpillars. They will graze your parsley, your carrots, your dill down to the ground. I've seen plants that have 5, 10 more of these larval forms, and so they're eating my food. So I love them, and they're beautiful. I just wish they didn't eat my food. Parsley is a biennial, and what that means is it is a plant that the first year it puts out its leaves. It comes as the curly form. This is the Italian flatleaf, which is my favorite form to grow of this. I think it's a little more flavorful. It forms that cluster of leaves, and then it does a little rosette, and then in year 2, it sends up its flower stalk and it sets its seed. Although if it's stressed, it can do it in year 1. This is another one that those swallowtail butterfly larvae will just chew this down to the ground. Because it is a biennial, this is bomb-proof on cold tolerance. In fact, this is designed to make it over a winter with minimal protection. So you get a season of growth on the first year, and then you get a little light harvest the next year before it goes to seed in spring. It's probably my favorite herb to plant, grow, and use because it just has tremendous nutrients in it and great flavor. And so this is a good one. I generally like to direct seed it. A lot of these Apiaceae families, they have a tap root, and disturbing a mature parsley might disturb that root. So cilantro is another member of the Apiaceae family. Its seed is the spice coriander. This plant has been around for a long, long time, and direct seeded is best. Here is the habit of cilantro, and a lot of people ask me about this. This is a plant that, as an annual, it matures quickly, right? So when we think about what an annual plant is compared to, say, a perennial plant, an annual plant is, in that first season, it's going to germinate, it's going to set out its leaves, it's going to grow for a little while, and then it's going to send up its flower stalk, where it's going to go to flower, hopefully get pollinated, and then set seed. That's its whole mission in life. And certain plants take longer or shorter to complete that mission. Cilantro does it quick. So a lot of folks will do one major planting of cilantro. And what happens is 4 to 6 weeks later, it's already set in seed and it's done growing. This is one that some folks will actually plant this and let it go to seed, and then it self seeds in that area, almost like a weed in that spot. If you're going to grow it and you want to use it throughout the season, you'll want to plant small amounts that you can use periodically so that you have a constant harvest. All parts of the plant, the leaves and the stems, have great flavor, and you can put those in there. And so I grow cilantro as well. I will say that anecdotally, I noticed that the larval form of the swallowtail butterflies seem to bug my cilantro a little bit less than the rest of the Apiaceae family. I'm not as worried that they're going to chew this to the ground. So mint. Mint is everybody's favorite herb to love and hate. This is a hardy perennial. In fact, I'll go as far to say it is a bomb-proof perennial. In fact, it can be hard to eradicate mint once it gets established. This is one that you never have to buy it. Somebody will gladly donate some mint cuttings to you because they are trying to control it a little bit best. If you plant this just like in a raised bed or in your garden, it will send runners, it will put out seeds from its flower, it will spread like mad, and it can actually choke out your desired stuff. So this is an invasive. Container's best. It does much better contained in a container. It will overwinter in a container just fine. I'll be honest, I love mint. I love it because I use it for a number of different culinary uses. It comes in a wide variety of flavors, and it comes in a wide variety of, believe it or not, sort of color texture combinations for the leaves is ready. So if you want to start some mint, just walk around your neighborhood, find a neighbor, they will give you some of this, put it in a container, and then you'll have mint for the rest of your life. So here's lemon balm. This is in the mint family, and I really like this. This is one I don't see as many people grow. Extraordinarily hardy perennial. Like a lot of the mints, great pollinator flower. The pollinators love this. They put out sort of these clusters of tinier flowers that they really can get a lot of nectar out of. Invasive, this is mint, family invasive level, heavy duty. This is spreading all over the place. It's already jumped out of the container that I have it in, and now I'm fighting it in weird places. But I really like it because when I use it when I'm cooking, it has a great sort of delicate mint flavor. It's not that overwhelming mint flavor, and it has a little citrus background with a whole bunch of nice herbaceous notes in it. So if you're looking for a new herb that you want to try, especially if you like to cook, I highly recommend you work lemon balm into your rotation, because this is one that you will find has a lot of different uses, whether you're putting it in a beverage or you're putting it in a dish for chicken or fish or something like that. But keep in mind, this is mint's very, very close cousin, and it acts just like it. Overwinters elitely, does not mind any level of cold or heat. And in fact, when it gets super established, hard to get rid of. So basil, this is one that I actually recommended as sort of that gateway herb to get started with. Basil does great if you buy a transplant. Basil does great if you direct seed. The seed comes up fairly quick, and you can get a harvest on basil starting pretty early on. Lots of different varieties. This is a tender annual. This is one of the very first plants that when we get a frost is going to get whacked by that frost, even more so than a tomato or a pepper plant. So very easy to grow. Here's a key with basil, and I notice a lot of people. So that top picture, you can see that the basil's starting to go to seed. And here's the thing about annuals. When they start to go to seed, when they switch from vegetative to reproductive, generally what happens is there's a change in the consistency and the flavor of those leaves, because it's not putting that energy into that vegetative growth. It's putting energy into making a seed head, get a flower out there, get pollinated, complete its life cycle. And a lot of folks will trim, trying to keep their plant where it's going to grow more leaves, but it's done doing that. And so what I tell folks is, Grow basil lots of times in rotations over the course of a season. I grow basil probably 3 or 4 times. When it's starting to go to seed, I'm done with it. It goes in the compost pile. I always have a new fresh basil with those big tender leaves ready to go. Got one going right now, just started some basil. That's going to be used with all the fresh herbs that are out there now in spring for any number of dishes. And then the second planting is going to be the one that I pair up with my summer tomatoes later on in the season. And then my last planting is one that I'm going to harvest those leaves and I'm going to dry them and store them over the winter. So I have some basil that I grew for when I cook. So, you buy a packet of basil seed, you're going to have lots of seeds in there. Make sure you use them up. Plant basil several times so that you always have some basil ready to go. So thyme, we're going to talk about a few herbs now in that Lamiaceae family that are perennials, kind of shrub-like, almost like a pine tree ish in terms of how they look and how they smell when you handle them. They are perennials. They are best from transplant because you can start them from seed. But if you've ever looked at the seed for these, it's extraordinarily tiny seed and they take forever to germinate. And then it takes even longer before it gets to a size that is good for you to use. And so, for the same cost as a seed packet, you can go out and you can buy a transplant of this, put it in a container that it's going to grow throughout the season so you have it ready to go. It's a fairly hardy perennial. And what I mean by that is it's not super bomb proof like a bunch of them. It's not going to take the polar vortex, but it's going to do okay if we have the average Ohio winter, whatever that means. And so it does okay with a little protection. But I've lost some time stands and had to start over when we get just the vicious cold. Tolerates heat, tolerates drought, right? This is a Mediterranean plant, and it loves the sun, and a lot of these herbs in direct sun will really, really pump out the essential oils that make them so flavorful. But this one will tolerate a little shade. And in fact, mine grows in a little bit of shade now, but thyme's a favorite of mine. So sage, same family, doesn't look anything like it. Extremely hardy perennial. Sage is as close to bomb proof. Almost, it's basically mint-like. This is one that is more of a woody, almost ornamental plant compared to, say, a mint, which has got more of a succulent stem. Sage has been around forever. Lots of different cultivars, different colors as well. Sage makes the most amazing purple pollinator flower when it's allowed to flower, which, it's a perennial. So at some point in the summer, this is going to move into a flowering state before it turns into its perennial fall self that is trying to save as much energy into its root ball to overwinter. I've been growing the same sage plant in the same giant container for about 20 years. It comes back every time. I don't baby it at all. I might throw a scoop of compost in that soil just to top it off a little bit, but I never fertilize it. And right now it looks like the oldest gnarled tree you ever saw, but it comes back every year and I'm grateful for that. So this is one, again, buy yourself a transplant. You could start it from seed. And this actually does a little bit better from seed than some of the other ones because my sage sort of self-sows all around the container in the mulch bed. But to get a nice big sage plant going right away, grab a transplant, get it in a pot, and you'll have sage probably forever off that plant. So rosemary is in the same family as well. This is a tender perennial here, meaning that it will overwinter if we don't have crushing cold, especially if you protect it. In fact, here at the farm, I'm on Waterman Farm right now, they grow rosemary. They dig it up every year and they overwinter it in the greenhouse just to make sure it doesn't go away. This is one that is also best done from transplant. But when I say tender perennial here, it's interesting because if you've ever gone down, say, in the Carolinas or Texas, this actually is grown as a landscape planting down there, and it gets as big as a hedge. So it's really interesting when you look at it and you're like, that hedge looks like rosemary. And the minute you touch rosemary and you get that rosemary smell, you know what you found. It smells absolutely fabulous. One of my favorite ones to grow and one of my favorite ones to cook with, but you have to do a little bit of some care with this one to make sure that it's going to stay over the course of the season for you. Oregano, extremely hardy perennial, close cousin to marjoram in that same Lamiaceae family. This is one that right now in my garden, the oregano is perfect. It is growing rock solid fast. Within the next month, it is going to transition to its reproductive self, and it's going to be less awesome. It's going to send up some really tall, nice pollinator flower stems. And so right now is when I'm actually harvesting oregano to save for drying, because it is its absolute perfect right now. It doesn't mind the cool weather, very, very tolerant of that. And it's actually mildly invasive, not quite mint level, but I've actually had people send me pictures and say, what is this weed? And I'm like, that is oregano. All right, so we're done with the mint family. Let's talk about chives. Chives are in the allium family, right? So they're related to leeks and garlic and shallots and onions. Cold, bomb-proof tolerant. Chives will grow over the winter in their little spot. Hardy perennial that way. They tolerate a little shade. They really can form a big clump in the sun. This is one you can grow if you buy a transplant and you divide it. This is one that you can start from seed. Use fresh seed. Alliums are notorious for losing their germination percentage after year 1. Most alliums have a pretty long germination time, at least 2 weeks, if up to 3 weeks. But if you had a big pot and you have a little bit of time and you got a packet of seed, you could spread that around that pot and grow yourself a nice patch of chive seed. Just keep that seed moist until it germinates. And then you have chives going for a while. Right now, my chives are going to seed. They are one of the very first things that emerge right after the cold enters. So it's one of the first herbs I'm using right up there with my oregano. And it puts out a really pretty purple sort of cluster flower, and that flower is actually edible. So I had a question that somebody wanted to attend this class, but they couldn't. And they're like, Tim, would you please talk about if you can grow herbs all year round? And you can. Now, can you grow them in your sunny windowsill? Sort of. They do better with full sun, like we talked about, and that's full Mediterranean sun, which means they like their sun. So if you brought in, say, your parsley at the end of the season and you put it in a sunny windowsill, you're still going to get a little bit of growth and you're going to get some parsley production. It's not going to do as well if it's something like the basil in the middle, because it just likes sun more. But what I recommend you do is, if you really want to grow stuff over the course of that winter and you want to beat the winter blues, then planting and using the new batches of different LED light panels that are out there is something that you're really going to enjoy. I grow throughout the winter. I got little hydroponic setups. On the left, that's just a grow light I use for starting seedlings, and there's some, actually it's romaine under there in the picture. On the right, that's actually an LED piece of furniture. LED prices have really come down, and it makes it so much easier for us to grow stuff inside. That's actually an end table that you can grow 4 plants. That can be flowers, that can be, I did kale in there before, you could do basil in there. And on the top of that is actually some coasters, and you can put a book or some reading glasses on that. So if you want to grow indoors over the course of the winter, herbs do really, really well in either under LED lighting or hydroponic systems. So on that note, whoopsie, I'm going to leave this up and I'm going to see if we have a whole bunch of chat questions.